what a great business. You get to age.
Even though there's no physical contact in tennis, there's still a lot of eye contact when we're changing ends, when we're sitting on the bench, and then the big screen.
BARBRA STREISAND tried to silence Novak Djokovic. His live TV response left the entire studio speechless. When Hollywood royalty decides to step into the arena of professional sports and point a finger at one of the greatest athletes the world has ever produced, you had better believe the fallout is going to be nothing short of legendary. Because this isn't a story about tennis. This isn't even a story about celebrity drama, though there is plenty of that to go around. This is a story about power, about silence, about what happens when the most psychologically unbreakable man in the history of professional sport is told, by one of the most famous voices on the entire planet, that his voice should simply cease to exist.
Even though there's no physical contact in tennis, there's still a lot of eye contact when we're changing ends, when we're sitting on the bench, and then the big screen.
This is the story of the moment BARBRA STREISAND tried to silence Novak Djokovic, and the ice-cold, calculated, absolutely devastating response that stopped an entire television studio dead in its tracks and sent the internet into a frenzy that nobody saw coming. Picture the scene. On one side of this collision, you have BARBRA STREISAND, a woman who needs absolutely no introduction, a titan of Hollywood, a Grammy-winning, Oscar-winning, Tony-winning, Emmy-winning legend of the entertainment world, a woman who has built an empire not just on her voice, but on the unapologetic wielding of that voice as a weapon. She has never shied away from controversy. She has never hesitated to call out names, draw battle lines in public, and use her colossal global platform to declare exactly what she thinks and exactly who she thinks should be heard and, perhaps more critically, who she thinks should be shut down. BARBRA STREISAND is not someone who operates quietly. She is someone who understands the immense weight that her words carry, and she has spent decades deploying them with ruthless precision. On the other side of this extraordinary collision, you have Novak Djokovic, the Joker, 24 Grand Slam titles, the greatest male tennis player in the history of the sport by virtually every statistical measure that has ever been devised. A man from Belgrade who grew up practicing his serves in the basement of a building while bombs fell on his city, who went on to dismantle every record, every barrier, and every single narrative that said it couldn't be done. But here is what separates Novak Djokovic from every other champion in this sport, and arguably from most champions in any sport. It is not the titles. It is not the records. It is the psychological armor. Because Djokovic has spent his entire career performing his greatest victories not just on the court, but inside his own head. He has learned to absorb crowd hostility. He has learned to digest media hatred. He has been booed in stadiums where the entire crowd, every single person, was rooting against him, and he has still found a way to walk out with the trophy. Novak Djokovic does not just win tennis matches. He wins the psychological war that precedes, accompanies, and follows every single one of them. So when BARBRA STREISAND made the decision to label Djokovic as dangerous and publicly suggest that a man of his global reach and influence should simply be silenced, she almost certainly had no idea what she had just done. She had handed the wolf exactly the kind of challenge he was born to answer. What followed was one of the most talked about television moments in recent sporting memory. The cameras were rolling. The world was watching. Novak Djokovic sat across from the interviewer, composed, relaxed, and utterly unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. There was no rage flickering behind his eyes. There was no trembling lip, no clenched jaw, no barely contained fury ready to erupt. He simply listened as Streisand's declaration was put before him. The accusation of being dangerous, the suggestion that his voice posed some kind of threat so significant that it should be muzzled. And then, with the precision of a surgeon and the calmness of a man who has stood in far more terrifying moments than this one, Djokovic did something nobody expected. He read it. He read every single word of her statement out loud, slowly, deliberately, letting each syllable hang in the studio air like smoke. And when the last word had left his lips, he paused. Not a nervous pause, not an uncertain pause, the kind of pause that people with absolute, immovable confidence deploy as a weapon. A pause that said, listen to what she just said, and listen to what it means. And then, quietly, calmly, looking directly into the camera, he said it. Disagreement is not dangerous, and silencing voices is not democratic. The studio went silent, not the polite, uncomfortable silence of a moment nobody knows how to handle. The profound, stunned, total silence of a room full of people who have just watched something extraordinary happen and have absolutely no idea how to follow it. The interviewer had nothing. The production team had nothing. The audience, watching at home, had nothing, except the burning, immediate need to rewind that clip and share it with every single person they knew. Within minutes, the footage was spreading across every platform on the internet. Within hours, it had been viewed millions of times. The clips were dubbed the most silent response on television by commentators who couldn't stop watching it on loop. Because what Djokovic had done wasn't just clever. It was a masterclass in the kind of restraint that most people never achieve in a lifetime, let alone under the hot lights of a television studio with the entire sports media waiting to frame every syllable he uttered. Restraint, it turns out, can be infinitely more devastating than outrage. He gave Streisand's words no room to breathe. He simply laid them out in the open air, let the world look at them clearly, and then dismantled them with one quiet, steely sentence. But to truly appreciate the seismic weight of what happened in that studio, we have to understand who Novak Djokovic actually is, not the sanitized, carefully packaged version that his detractors prefer to argue against, but the real, deeply complex, endlessly compelling human being behind the records. Because Novak Djokovic is not merely a tennis player. He is one of the most provocative, polarizing, and intellectually honest public figures in the entire landscape of professional sport. For years, he has refused to play the game the way the establishment expected him to play it. He has spoken openly about his deeply personal beliefs around his body, his health, and his sovereignty over his own choices, even when those choices made him the most controversial athlete on the planet. We all remember the extraordinary global storm that engulfed him in recent years. The debates that erupted across every political and cultural spectrum. The moments where politicians, journalists, celebrities, and world leaders suddenly found themselves weighing in on the life choices of a tennis player from Serbia, as though they had been waiting for exactly this excuse. Through it all, through the tournaments he was barred from, through the titles he was unable to defend, through the millions of dollars in prize money and sponsorship income that evaporated into the controversy, Djokovic stood firm. He did not bend. He did not issue the carefully worded apology that everyone was waiting for. He remained exactly who he is, unapologetically, at enormous personal cost. And that is precisely what makes Barbra Streisand's intervention so breathtakingly tone-deaf. Because when you accuse a man of being dangerous for thinking differently and call for his silencing, you are not challenging him. You are giving him his greatest weapon. You are confirming to the millions of people who have followed his journey, who have watched him absorb unimaginable pressure and come out swinging on the other side, that the establishment is exactly as allergic to independent thought as he has always said it was. The irony that a woman from an industry built on creative expression, on the fundamental human right to say what you feel and tell stories that challenge the status quo, would advocate for silencing an athlete because she disagreed with his worldview. That irony was not lost on anyone watching those clips. It was not lost on Djokovic either, but he didn't need to spell it out. He let the silence do that work for him. Now here is where the story gets even more compelling, because in the world of professional tennis, 2026 has been nothing short of extraordinary. And if you think the drama off the court is intense, wait until you hear what has been happening on it. The so-called new era of men's tennis, with Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz leading the charge, has been a relentless, breathless, endlessly entertaining battle for supremacy at the top of the sport. These two generational talents have been trading blows at the biggest stages on the calendar, each one trying to establish themselves as the undisputed heir to the throne that Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer occupied for the better part of 2 decades. Sinner has been particularly formidable, his precision and consistency making him one of the most difficult opponents in the history of the sport to break down. Alcaraz, meanwhile, brings that electric, chaotic brilliance that makes him arguably the most watchable player on tour, capable of producing moments of tennis genius that make even the most seasoned observers reach for their phones to start filming. These two have been putting on a show in 2026. But here is the thing. and every serious tennis fan knows this. Neither of them has had to deal yet with the full, undiluted, "this is my legacy" version of Novak Djokovic at a Grand Slam final. And that version of Djokovic, the one who arrives when everything is on the line and the historical weight of the moment is pressing down on every bone in his body, remains the most dangerous force in tennis. Not dangerous in the Barbra Streisand sense of the word. Dangerous in the way that only a man who has already won everything and still refuses to stop can be dangerous. The Australian Open earlier this year gave us a glimpse of the simmering tension at the top of the men's game. The grueling battles in the heat of Melbourne, the moments where the physical and psychological demands of the sport push players to their absolute limits. Djokovic has been strategic about his schedule, protecting his body with the wisdom of a man who understands that the calendar is long and the Grand Slams are the only stages that matter to his ultimate mission. While the younger generation races around the world chasing ranking points and title after title on every surface imaginable, Djokovic is playing chess. He is choosing his moments. He is sharpening himself for the specific stages where history is written and records are cemented, the only stages that have ever truly mattered to him. And that strategic discipline, that refusal to burn bright everywhere and risk burning out entirely, is yet another dimension of the same psychological mastery that made his response to Streisand so compelling. He doesn't waste energy. He doesn't scatter his fire. He stores it, focuses it, and releases it at the exact moment when it will have the greatest possible impact. This is not coincidental. This is not luck. This is the product of a life spent mastering the art of performing under conditions that would break the vast majority of human beings. Think about what it has actually meant to be Novak Djokovic over the last decade. Not the trophy lifts, not the net embraces, not the tearful speeches, but the daily reality of being the man the crowd wants to lose. Of walking into stadiums in Paris, in London, in New York, in Melbourne, and hearing 20,000 voices unite against you. Of reading your name in 1,000 negative headlines and knowing that your response cannot be anger, because anger is what they want. Anger is the fuel they need to keep the narrative alive. Djokovic learned something that most people never learn in their entire lives. He learned that when you remove the need for external validation completely, when you genuinely, fundamentally stop requiring the crowd's approval to feel worthy of being on the court, you become untouchable. The crowd can boo. The celebrities can tweet. The politicians can grandstand. And you can simply walk to the baseline, bounce the ball 3 times, and hit a first serve at 200 kilometers an hour that nobody in the building can return. That is freedom. Real, unassailable, hard-won freedom. And that freedom is what Barbra Streisand, despite all of her extraordinary achievements and all of her genuine power, simply cannot take away. Because it doesn't live in a press release or a social media post or a television appearance. It lives inside Djokovic himself, built brick by brick through 2 decades of choosing integrity over comfort, authenticity over approval, and silence. His silence, chosen on his own terms, over the noise of people who have never had to face a match point down at Wimbledon with the weight of history on their shoulders. The broader cultural conversation that this moment ignited is one that goes far beyond tennis or Hollywood. We are living in an era where the volume of public discourse has reached genuinely deafening levels. There is an industrial machine built around outrage. There are careers, entire media empires, built on the engine of telling people what to think, who to admire, who to fear, and whose voice is too dangerous to be heard. Athletes, especially athletes who operate on the global stage with the kind of reach that only a player like Djokovic commands, have increasingly become targets of this machine. They are expected to be ambassadors for approved causes, to speak from approved scripts, and to politely withdraw their opinions on any subject that might create friction with the prevailing consensus. When they refuse, the machine labels them dangerous. It calls for their silencing. It mobilizes famous voices to apply pressure from the top, assuming that the weight of celebrity will accomplish what direct criticism could not. What Djokovic demonstrated in that television moment is that this strategy has a fundamental flaw. It only works on people who need the machine's approval. It shatters completely against someone who has spent their entire career building their sense of self entirely from within. You cannot silence a man by calling him dangerous when he has already survived being the most hated man in his sport and come out the other side with 6 more Grand Slam titles. You cannot diminish a legacy that is already written in the historical record, permanent and undeniable, regardless of what any celebrity says about it. The scoreboard never lies. The titles never disappear. And the quiet authority of a man who looks into a camera and says silencing voices is not democratic, with the same composure he would deploy facing a match point in a Grand Slam final. That kind of authority is not diminished by criticism. It is amplified by it. There is a lesson here that extends well beyond the world of sport. In an age of constant noise, the ability to be genuinely still, to respond rather than react, to choose the measured word over the explosive outburst, to let the clarity of a simple truth do what 1,000 screaming sentences cannot, is perhaps the most radical act available to any public figure. Djokovic has always known this. It is why his greatest rivals, his greatest fans, and even his most passionate critics all share one grudging common ground. You cannot look away from him, even when you want to. Even when he is saying things you disagree with, or standing for positions that make you uncomfortable, there is a gravitational pull to his presence that is impossible to deny. He commands attention not by demanding it, but by doing the one thing that almost nobody in public life has the discipline to do consistently. He means what he says, and he says it on his own terms, in his own time, regardless of who is watching. As the 2026 season continues to unfold and the calendar moves toward the clay courts of Roland Garros, where Djokovic has written some of the most dramatic chapters of his legendary story, the questions are mounting. Can he challenge Sinner and Alcaraz on the surface where they have shown their most complete, dominant tennis? Can his body hold up under the savage demands of best-of-5-set marathon matches in the Paris heat? Does he still have the hunger, the burning, almost irrational hunger that has driven him every single day since he decided as a child in war-torn Belgrade that he was going to be the best tennis player the world had ever seen? Anyone paying attention to how Djokovic carries himself, on television, in interviews, on the court, already knows the answer. The hunger has never left. If anything, every attempt to diminish him, every celebrity call for his silencing, every hostile crowd, every controversial narrative, they all go into the furnace. And what comes out the other side is not a broken man. What comes out is more fuel. What comes out is a first serve at 200 kilometers an hour and a backhand winner down the line in the most important moment of the most important match of the year, because that is what Novak Djokovic does with everything the world throws at him. He converts it. He weaponizes it. He hits it back harder than it arrived. So, to BARBRA STREISAND, and to anyone else who thought that calling for the silencing of this particular man was going to accomplish anything other than handing him the perfect stage for another masterclass, welcome to the lesson. The Joker doesn't fold under pressure. He has never folded under pressure. He built his entire identity, his entire legacy, on the rock-solid foundation of not folding under pressure. The silence in that studio after he spoke? That was the sound of 17 words defeating a demand that had the full weight of Hollywood behind it. Disagreement is not dangerous, and silencing voices is not democratic. Simple, clean, devastating. The most powerful backhand he has hit all year, and he didn't even need a racket. Now I want to hear from you, because this story absolutely deserves a conversation. Do you think public figures like Streisand should use their platforms to call out athletes and demand they be silenced? Or does that kind of intervention cross a line that celebrity culture should respect? And what did you make of Djokovic's response? Was that ice-cold restraint the right move? Or should he have come out swinging harder? Drop everything you're thinking in the comments section right now, because I genuinely read every single comment on this channel, and your takes on this one are going to be absolutely incredible. If this video gave you that feeling, that locked-in, can't look away feeling that only the biggest stories in tennis can deliver, then please smash that like button. It takes you 2 seconds, and it means the absolute world to this channel. And if you are not already part of the Champions Tennisitics family, what are you even doing? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you are always the first person to know when we drop the next story. Because trust me, in the world of tennis right now, the stories are only getting bigger. The drama is only getting more intense, and we are going to be right here bringing you every single second of it. Until next time, stay locked in, stay champion, and never let anyone silence your voice.
Even though there is no physical contact in tennis, There's still a lot of eye contact when we're changing ends, when we're sitting on the bench, and then the big screen.